CST DEI committee. And essentially, this is our third year running, so we're really excited for this cohort. And wait for the applications to start coming in. And we're going to essentially pick around 10 students. And from there, you're going to be paired with a PI, and we're going to explain a little more about that later. So this is our committee. We have Eric Cortez. Unfortunately, he's not here today. He is our professor and vice chair of biology, as well as the CST faculty advisor. So he looks over everything. And then Hajra, if you want to start to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hajra. I'm a senior biology major, and I have a minor in art.
Hello, my name is Gibreel. Hi. I'm a junior, and I am a neuroscience major.
I'm Salma. I'm a senior neuroscience major with a minor in criminal justice, and I'm really excited to be meeting all of you.
Hey, I'm Samar. I'm a first year college student and my major is neuroscience.
Awesome. And
I think for the interest of time, we can just skip the introductions. Initially, we were going to have all of you guys kind of introduce yourselves, but since we realized that many of you are most likely in class, we can just like move on so that this doesn't take too long out of your day.
our mission statement, as I mentioned earlier, SPROUT, it stands for Science Preparatory Research Opportunities for Underrepresented Teens. And the goal of this is it aims to provide students with low socioeconomic status, early exposure to graduate level research education, improve the research enterprise through increased diversity, and prepare and recruit passionate students to Temple University's College of Science and Technology. So here are some of the things that we just wanted to specifically highlight about this program. So as I mentioned earlier, everyone's going to be paired with one mentor who's going to be a researcher at Temple University. And in the application process, I'm not sure if any of you have got a look at it yet, we're going to talk more about it later, but we asked for your like top 3 like interests. And from there, if you are selected, we try to match you as perfectly as we can with the researcher from Temple University. And yeah, then you're also introduced to graduate level research, and that puts you like far ahead because what high schoolers are really getting opportunities to do research at this point. So it really looks good if you are planning on going to college and pursuing higher levels of education. It's really good to have an experience like this under your belt. Thankfully, like people from our last cohort, our last 2 years, some of them have actually stayed with their research past the summer. So that's really good for like networking and connecting. We're also going to have scale building workshops. We're going to explain later exactly what those are. And then the ability to present research. We're going to have a research presentation at the end of at the end of the summer, where everyone gets to just present exactly what they found. We go to Temple University, we have food, drinks, you can bring your family, and you just have a poster board and you're able to just present everything that you did during your research during the time. And everyone, just for completion of the program, if you complete all the necessary steps, everyone receives $1,000 each, and as well as transportation. We can explain that later on when, if selected, how the transportation will work. For example, if you do need the train to get to Temple University's campus, if you're doing research there, as long as you keep track of how much it costs each time you use the train, we can help reimburse you for that. And then something we are really excited to announce that has started this year is that you will also have priority to receive Temple CST scholarships. CST is the College of Science and Technology at Temple. So if you do end up planning on going to Temple after completion of this program, you have priority to get scholarships there, which is really nice. And we're excited to have that.
All right. So in terms of diversity in STEM, I think that we're all aware that there is a prevalent issue in the STEM field, and that is the issue of diversity or lack thereof. Any industry thrives when people from different backgrounds and experiences are able to collaborate and provide different perspectives. But when you have some people at an advantage over others due to their socioeconomic status, race, gender, or any other factor, it causes this disparity that can be very harmful to several groups of people. So this project aims to address this issue directly by providing exposure to you guys who are from all sorts of backgrounds to research opportunities at Temple. And so as a result, you will all be exposed to not only the research enterprise, but also the involvement of Temple University with the Philadelphia community. And we hope you'll be able to participate in this relationship as you move on from high school too. Next slide. Underrepresentation within the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields remains a persistent issue. According to a study by the Pew Research Center in 2018, minorities were disproportionately underrepresented within the STEM field. Black and Latinx populations comprise only 9% and 7% respectively. The intersection between gender and race has an even larger disparity, with women of color being the most underrepresented group in STEM. Catalyst reports that women of color represent 14.1% of bachelor's degrees across all STEM fields, with Black and Latina women making up merely 2.9% and 4.3% respectively. The STEM fields thrive when people from different backgrounds and experiences are able to collaborate and provide distinct perspectives. So this project aims to address this issue directly by providing exposure to minorities entering a Philadelphia high school to unique research opportunities Temple University has to offer.
All right, so next I'm going to briefly discuss sort of the program logistics and talk about the overall structure of how your summer will look like if you do end up applying and being selected. So Gibreel had kind of mentioned this earlier, but you'll get one-on-one mentorship. So we are pretty intentional with making sure that each student is assigned with a mentor that is completing research in whichever area that you're interested in. So we offer things from chemistry to biology to neuroscience to physics. And so we really try to be, tailor the lab that you get picked into something that you may pursue later on. And all of these mentors are volunteering to include you into their lab. So many of them have like a strong passion for teaching. They're really interested in having high school students alongside with them. And so, in addition to your faculty PI mentor, we also will be assigning you a peer mentor, which will be someone from the Sprout committee that will do periodic check-ins with you. And then you'll also be receiving mentors with grad students or undergraduate students or whoever else is working in that lab. So there's a lot of structural support there. As far as the actual week-to-week structure goes, we try to keep it as accommodating and flexible for everyone's schedule because we obviously realize everyone here has their own, you may have other commitments over the summer, so we want to try to be as mindful of that as possible. So our basic requirements is that you complete a minimum of 10 hours of research per week. We have students that complete a lot more, some but that's kind of our baseline. And then meeting with your PI a minimum of once a week. So typically this is in person, but this can be virtual as well. And that will be for periodic check-ins. And then we did a better job planning the start and end dates of the programs, unlike the time we selected for this orientation. So the actual start date of the program will be after all of your, the school ends. And I'm pretty sure we made sure that it was after AP and IB exams as well, so that you guys have time to study that before you get started with a whole research project. And so bi-weekly, sometimes weekly, we'll have these skill building workshops that will touch on things about literature review, how to present your research, statistical analysis, things that we feel like are important to kind of better you as a research scientist, and we'll explain those a little bit more in depth. And then, as Gibreel mentioned earlier, that the highlight or conclusion of the program will be a formal research symposium, which we'll hold at Temple. So a lot of our faculty Science faculty will be there. Our dean of the college is always there. You're welcome to invite your friends, families, anyone else that you want. There will be food, and it'll kind of be an opportunity to highlight the work that you've done with us. So the general timeline, the program start date is Wednesday, June 19th. So like I said, we try to keep it after all of your requirements. You'll be paired with your mentor early on. So we do allow students to reach out earlier if they would like to, but we kind of ask that you schedule your first meeting with your PI that week or early the next week. And then there will be like a orientation more specific to anyone that gets accepted. And then we have educational webinars. We can hold these in Zoom or in person. We typically will decide based on what the selected group prefers. They're usually 1 to 2 hours in length. And like I said earlier, they're really just meant to kind of refine some of your research tools. They're also a really good opportunity for us to touch base with all the students, make sure everyone's on track for their research, and offer our support there. And then the research symposium is tentatively scheduled for Thursday, August 19th, in the College of Science and Technology lobby. It'll be a poster board presentation, which we'll print out and kind of handle all of that. So for the workshops, we have 8. The first one is just a basic orientation. Again, we'll go more in depth in terms of program expectations, stuff like that. And then we have a second workshop where we will give an overview about the introduction to research. So we touch about, how do you start, ways to be an effective member of the lab team. And then another important webinar that we talk about is mentee and mentor relationships. We obviously understand that being a high school student and working in a lab can be incredibly stressful, especially if you don't feel like you have the level of education that the rest of the lab teams have. So we kind of try to address that and give you guys as much advice as you can to navigate those relationships. We have our statistics professor give a lecture on an introduction to statistics that we feel like applies for a more basic analysis. We do have a workshop on diversity in research. And then towards the end of the program, we transition into presenting research. So everything related to that. And then we also included a college process workshop where we'll walk through and try to provide you guys with as many resources as we can about how to actually apply to college. And then lastly, we have a feedback meeting. This is typically one-on-one interviews, but so I have the dates that we have tentatively scheduled them for on the right side.
So this is just a little more to talk about the Sprout Research Symposium. Salma talked about that already, but as you mentioned, it's going to be late in August, and it's just going to be, you're going to have a poster board presentation. As Salma mentioned, we're going to print it out for you, so you don't have to worry about that. And we kind of give you like the same template and rubric to use. The presentations don't need to be that long. They're only going to be 10 to 15 minutes. And we do end up giving out an award for the best presentation, and everyone will receive a certificate once the completion of their research.
All right, so now I'll take you briefly through the application process and talk a little bit about what we're looking for. So first off, here are a couple of basic requirements we have for applicants. So to apply, you have to be a high school junior at the time of application, a resident of Philadelphia, and you must legally be able to work in the state. And so since Sprout's aim is towards promoting diversity in STEM, applications from those belonging to historically underrepresented groups are preferred. But even if that doesn't pertain to you necessarily, everyone is still welcome to apply. All right, next slide. So when applying, there are a couple of documents we do need from you. So first is a letter of recommendation from your teacher. We don't have any requirements for the subject, so really focus on finding a teacher who you have a good relationship with and who you think can really speak to who you are as a student rather than worrying so much about finding maybe like a science or math teacher. The next thing we need is an unofficial transcript. Now, I want to stress here that while required, letters of recommendation and transcripts are supplementary materials. So even if your grades aren't, like perfect straight A's, we don't want you to feel as though you can't apply or you won't get accepted, because for us, grades aren't really a definitive factor in determining who gets in or not. And then finally, we have a couple of open response questions, and we'll talk more about those in a moment. All right, just so there are no surprises, let's talk a bit about the format of the application. So when you open up the Google form, it'll ask for some basic information, just like your name and your contact info. And then the form will ask you to rank a couple of different research areas by interest. And as we spoke about before, here we ask you to give us your top 3 areas of interest. I think that's on the next slide. That shows the format of that. Yeah, so here are the research interest categories. And we do this because ideally we want you to explore an area of research that you're already interested in, or that you've been thinking that you might want to explore a bit more. And so that way we can try to match you to a lab that like meets those research interest areas of yours. Okay, so next we have the open-ended questions. So for this part of the application, we have 3 questions for you. Now it's important to note that while each of these questions does have a word limit, we still want you to formulate a well thought out response to these questions. And so this is a part of the application that we really want you to put effort into, because we do actually read all of your responses and we will be looking at these. And so we don't want you to write just like 1 or 2 sentences and then call it a day. Like, please actually take the time to formulate a good response here. And then finally, we have the interviews. So applications close January 27th. And after we've read through all of your applications, some of you will be invited back for an interview. So if you are selected, we'll notify you and you'll be prompted to select a time slot for your interview to take place. So the interviews will take place the week of February the 13th, and they're very brief. They should only take about 10 minutes of your time. And so during the interview, you'll meet with potential faculty members based on your research interests and members of the Sprout Committee, all of us here today. And then once we've made our selections, we'll notify you by email if you got accepted or not. And our aim is to get those out by Friday, February 24th.
So now we're just going to look at a couple of the names that we have for the potential faculty members that you can be paired with. Just for a little reference, principal investigators just refers to that term over there. So first is for ecology. This is Dr. Cordes. He's been doing this as his 3rd year, and as you can recognize, he is also our faculty advisor. He'll be looking at predicting deep sea coral distribution for effective management. So here's a presentation actually from a student from last year. And we're just going to explain really briefly what the student did last year. This is kind of the format we've been following for everyone. We have the abstract, methodology, introduction, discussion, results, and references. And this should all take around, like as we mentioned, 10 to 15 minutes to present. Last year, he studied, like the student studied deep sea corals, and they looked at the biocomplexity as well as the biodiversity using dead and live coral.
All right, so fun fact, I was actually a member of this program, I believe 2 summers ago when we first started, summer 2021. And so this is the lab I worked in. My PI was Dr. Rob Kulathanol. And so the title of the project is like very lengthy, the neurogenomics of incipient speciation in Drosophila, always a mouthful. But essentially what it boiled down to was we were studying specific neurogenes that were related to mating behaviors in flies. And the theory was that these mating behaviors resulted in behavioral isolation of the flies, which eventually resulted in speciation, which is the divergence of a single population into multiple populations. And so while I was there, most of our work was very like computational and theoretical, and we didn't really do wet lab stuff. But I've heard back since then that they do have flies now. And so if you end up getting placed in this lab, you will, I believe, be given the opportunity to work with flies. And so it's a really cool lab if you're interested in like neuroscience and more work with fruit flies. Oh, and here's just the example of the poster I made, and then another student's poster from, I believe, last year.
So another faculty member that is doing this for the third year is Dr. Fleming. He's a organic chemistry teacher at Temple University. He was actually my organic chemistry teacher in 10th grade. And so he is really interested in making and developing different teaching tools so that simplify organic chemistry. So a big chunk of his research is dedicated to making 3D models of organic molecules and trying to see how effective it is at teaching, because organic chemistry is probably one of the hardest classes that you would take. If you want to go to the next slide. So here's an example of one of the poster boards from last year. So this student was doing was working under Dr. Fleming, and then he had a couple other lab members with him. His main goal was to see and assess how effective these data visualization tools were at basically enhancing or teaching students. So a big portion of his data, I believe, came from literature review. He also collected some data from surveys and ultimately put together this presentation that discussed how integral these teaching tools are for teaching students organic chemistry.
Another faculty member that will be joining us for this year is Dr. Bem. Her project was how human activities affect species dispersal, habitat selection, and species interaction. So her lab focuses on like urban ecology and how human populations and animal populations interact with each other. So this student was able to basically see how squirrel populations in urban areas versus rural areas compared. So the diversity, the quantity, and like different locations of areas in Philly. So she was working under a grad student in the lab, and they had a bunch of camera traps set up in different regions. And so she was basically able to identify each species, quantify them, and then use some statistics to kind of see if there was any correlation between like type of squirrel and like location. So yeah, this was her project. Another faculty who's going to be in the ecology topic is Dr. Helmus. They're both in the same lab. And so this is about species diversity, more specifically about spotted lanternflies. So this person was in the Dr. Helmus's lab. I think my first research experience sophomore year was with Dr. Helmus. So I also did a little bit of research on this, but this student was also able to use traps. These these traps are called circle traps, and they're also located in specific regions. And what this student did was basically correlate the presence of spotted lanternflies with a specific species of ants. And like her question was, is there a relationship between a certain ant species and spotted lanternflies? So she was able to also use statistics and like visualize that.
One thing to quickly note, we will have other labs. We didn't include them here because we're still recruiting some, but also we focused on lab PIs that had already had students so that we could kind of show you guys what was a student-led project look like. And so we had a physics project that we didn't include here, but just so that you know that there's kind of a more diverse range of projects. And I guess the next thing that we can transition to is if anyone has questions about anything that we said, comments, or anything that you would like us to address.
And just a reminder for everyone, we will be sending out the Zoom link for anyone that had to show up in the middle of the meeting. No worries at all. And thank you everyone for staying. And yeah, if you have any questions, and if you want to stay after, you want to ask a question one-on-one with us, that is also okay.
If no one has any questions, then we can end this meeting. You all get 27 minutes back into your day. If any questions come up as you're filling out the application or as you're kind of learning more about our program, you can always reach us at sprout@temple.edu. We also have a contact page on our website, so you can reach out to us. And then we have our personal emails if you want to reach us that way. But I mean, we're pretty responsive on the Sprout email, so feel free to put any or just send any questions that you have. Yeah, thank you guys all for showing up.